Hello, my friends, this is Jono, and it's such an honor to be keynoting the DevRel Awards. Thank you so much to the organizational team for inviting me to come and speak. Now, before I go on, I do have a bit of a confession I want to make to you all, and that is that I'm currently in the middle of recovering from COVID. I tested positive 3 days ago, and I immediately isolated away from my family and friends. I'm here in my fortress of solitude. And part of the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because, one, this is the reason why I'm recording this keynote on my iPhone and not my professional video equipment because I don't have it here. And two, if I sound a little bit less lucid than normal, well, it's because I'm recovering from COVID. Although that does presume that I sound lucid when I don't have COVID, and I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but I'll let you be the judge of that. I'm also going to try not to cough all the way through this because that'll be quite unpleasant. Now, before I go on, I do want to offer a quick shout out to Matthew Ravel and his team. I've known Matt now for over 20 years. We both used to live in the same town in the UK, and I started a Linux user group back then, and we met through the lug, if I remember correctly. And ever since those early days, he's been a really consistent force in recognizing and supporting amazing developer relations and marketing and other work. So I know it would mean the world if each of you just takes a couple of minutes and drops Matt and the team an email just thanking them for the great work that they do. I think that'd be really lovely. Now, when I tested positive 3 days ago, my world kind of changed, right? I immediately isolated away from my family. I canceled my entire schedule. And I kind of got into bed and started recovering, and I started thinking about some of the broader questions that we have, right? Primarily about mission and purpose. You know, when we're in our day-to-day every day, we get so distracted by the tactics. And this is what I want to talk about in this keynote, is what is the real focus and impact of DevRel? Like, what are we here to do beyond the tactics? You know, because we get so zoned in on, like, now the world is opening up, for example, which conferences should we be going to? Or how do we organize really amazing online and in-person events? How do we create content that is dynamic and compelling and converts well? How do we create amazing developer on-ramps and do code review and optimization? All of these really important pieces. But sometimes that important work can distract us from those broader questions of, what are we really here to do? Like, what is the bigger picture? What is the bigger impact that we as DevRel people are here to focus on? And I was laid in bed yesterday, and if I'm being honest with you, I was quite miserable. And I was thinking about this because I was thinking about this keynote. And it reminded me of a conversation I had a number of years ago with this guy called Stuart Langridge, who's a really good friend of mine. His nickname is Ack. Matthew's known him for a number of years as well. And he was a member of the Linux user group that I set up years ago. And I'd been working at this company called Canonical for about 3 or 4 weeks. And Canonical back then was this kind of mysterious company, not many people knew much about them, that was building this thing called Ubuntu, this Linux distribution. And it was founded by this mysterious millionaire called Mark Shuttleworth, who was flying around the world and hiring some of the most recognizable engineering talent in the Linux world and bring them all together to build this new Linux distribution. Now, they put together the first version, the Warty Warthog, and then he started hiring some other folks to kind of come in. And I was one of the early non-engineers who kind of came into the company. And like I said, I'd been there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I was struggling with quite a bit of imposter syndrome because I was looking at these other engineers, and I could point to the amazing work that they've been building because it was running on my computer. But I sat down with Ack, and we were drinking about 150 cups of tea in that evening. And I said to him, I was like, I don't understand what I'm here to do, right? Because what I do isn't special, right? It's completely obvious. Like, if you want to build a developer community, then you need to have great documentation. You need to have a good developer on-ramp. You need to engage with developers effectively. You need to have the right kind of incentives and rewards. It seems so obvious to me. And his response to me was, Jono, it might be obvious to you, but it isn't obvious to a lot of other people, right? He said, your brain is just wired up this way. You just look at the world through that lens. And as a contrast, he used himself as an example. Like, he is a software developer, has been for many years. He writes software primarily in Python. And he said, like, when I wake up in the morning, I think about building a new feature or fixing a bug or building a new piece of software. He said the technical implementation just kind of comes to me. Like, I don't really have to work it. It just kind of appears because my brain is wired up that way. So when I was laid in bed yesterday, I was thinking, we live in a world that is jam-packed with technology, right? From cell phones and tablets, and there's the blockchain and AI and ML and the web and all of these different pieces that wrap around us. And I don't mean to be offensive to my friends in the engineering world, but building the technology, in my mind, isn't really the hard part. We've been building technology for thousands of years, right? My phone and my laptop that are in front of me are hundreds of thousands of iterations away from the early chisels and hammers that archaeologists have found from early human civilizations. But fundamentally, the reason why technology has got to the point that it's got to is because it iterates and iterates and iterates every year. To me, the really hard part is helping the world to create technology that will solve a broad manifestation of problems, okay? In other words, getting technology into the hands of people who can have a real impact. And this is when I started thinking about human creativity. Like many of you, I'm inspired every day by just the pure depths of human creativity in the arts, in music, in film, in literature, and beyond, right? We live in a society where you can have ballet and death metal. And human brains created these two radically different art forms, right? And we have movies and literature and video games and art and sculpture and all of these amazing manifestations of creativity. But I was thinking about this, that creativity only really exists when it manifests in the real world, right? Because creativity that just lives in our brains is pure imagination. And imagination is great and it's important, and we should encourage it in everybody, and especially in kids. But it doesn't mean anything to anybody else when it's just your imagination. It only means something when you get it out into the real world, right? And that is the role of tools and technology. So, for example, outside of my work, I'm a musician. I have a band called Baron Carter. It's a metal band. No, it's got nothing to do with Baron Trump, before anybody asks. People always ask me that. And I write and record all the music. And then we have a singer who's in Germany and a drummer who's in Denmark. And it's kind of an international project. I come up with song ideas in my head all the time, but it doesn't really mean anything until I use the tools, Pro Tools and my recording equipment and whatever else, to get it out of my brain into a performance that's captured that can be played back to somebody else. And this is when I really started to zone in on why what we do in DevRel is so important. Because we all know that developers are the enablers of the future, right? Developers are building those tools that enable us to get the creativity out of our brains and into reality, that will manifest in all of those wonderful forms that we see in arts and music and film and literature and beyond, okay? So developers are a key to unlocking that future. But here's the thing, and this is going to sound potentially a little bit controversial, is that developers are put on this pedestal, right? They're heralded as these almost otherworldly beings with this sheer power of building any technological solution that they want, that they have this amazing intellect and influence on billion-dollar companies like Facebook and Microsoft and Google, paying enormous amounts of money to hire these developers. They can't get enough developers, right? And you hear endless stories of one developer changing the world, starting a movement, whether it's Linus Torvalds with Linux or whether it's Bill Gates with Microsoft or whatever it might be. And all of these things are right. They're correct. Developers have enormous impact in the world. We live in a world now where kind of the CIO doesn't really exist as much, right? Is that people listen to developers now, right? And I think rightly so. But the reality is that developers are just as human as we are. They struggle to get started. They struggle with imposter syndrome and anxiety and fear. They struggle to find meaning in their work and in the world. And, you know, over the course of my career, which is now over 22 years, I've met thousands of developers from all four corners of the planet. And I can tell you one thing for damn sure, is that developers need just as much inspiration as we do. Okay? And they're a changing demographic. Like, developers are no longer just educated white guys with neck beards, right? We're finding developers manifesting in all the wonderful elements of society, underrepresented groups from all over the world. I remember just before the pandemic started roaring into our consciousness that I was in Johannesburg in South Africa. It's the first time I had an opportunity to go to South Africa. And I met many developers there from very different upbringings and backgrounds, using different technologies, different ideas, different perspectives. It was wonderful, okay? So developers are this very human audience that is in this fundamental position of power of creating the tools that get our creativity out there into the world, okay? But because we're living in a world where software engineering and software development is becoming more of an option for people than ever before, it brings those challenges. If you're brand new as a developer, and you've probably got the same kind of imposter syndrome that I had when I was in front of all of those developers at Canonical, it means you need to learn new skills. You need to decipher this litany of technical terms and jargon, that you need to wrestle that imposter syndrome, anxiety, and fear. And in other words, I think what we're here to do is to help developers to be the best that they can be. Because when they are the best that they can be, we get the best tools, the best technology that then unlocks that creativity for everybody on the planet, okay? So this then kind of generates the elephant in the room question of, well, if we need to make them the best that they can be, are we the best that we can be? And I was thinking about this because this is the DevRel Awards, right? So are we the best that we can be? No. I hate to say it, but no. And the reason why is because the best is an aspiration. It's not a measurement, right? My 9-year-old son and I have this adorable little arms race going on that we've had for a number of years, where we tell each other that we love each other in different degrees. Like, he'll say, "Dad, I love you." And I'll be like, "I love you 50 times more." And he'll be like, "I love you 1,000,000 times more." And then we start getting into, like, you know, infinity times a zillion and stuff like that. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because there is no upper limit to my love for him and vice versa, right? Is that the best is always going to be slightly out of reach. And to me, that's what's so wonderful about working in a profession, in an area where there is no end game. There is no ultimate best, right? Is that it constantly forces us to improve and to optimize and to dream bigger and to dream better. Okay, so when we think about the DevRel Awards and we recognize all these amazing individuals and people who are doing all of this fabulous work, all of those folks are the best right now. But there'll be a lot of you watching this, more of you watching this, that aren't nominated or aren't receiving awards as the best in DevRel. And that's just fine, because everybody started out as not the best. And remember, the best isn't really a thing we can get to. The best is an aspiration. It's not a measurement. So to me, what we're here to do in DevRel, and where there is so much opportunity to impact the world in such a fundamental way, is that when we figure out the best possible recipe for helping developers to create amazing technology, to work with other developers and collaborate on new technology, to build those tools and to build those facilities and services and functions that they create, it really is helping human ingenuity and human creativity to manifest in the real world, and that benefits absolutely everyone, okay? You know, this is kind of the stuff that I think about when I'm laid in bed sick for a couple of days. But I'm happy that it kind of came about, because sometimes, you know, again, we get so wrapped up in the tactics, in the day-to-day of what we're doing. And many of you will work for people who've got a lot of expectations of what you're there to do. But when you're sat there in your darker moments and you are feeling exhausted and tired, and you've got some of that imposter syndrome, which impacts literally everybody at some point, and you're thinking, why am I doing this? I want you to remember what I'm saying here. The reason why you're doing what you're doing is because you're unlocking the creativity in people all over the world, in generations that haven't even been born yet, okay? So thank you so much to all of you for the amazing work that you do. It really is meaningful. It really is important. And it really isn't obvious either, okay? So it might be obvious to you, but it's not obvious to most people. Take care, everyone.